Welcome to Coming Back to Club, everybody. So thankful that you have joined us today. We are going to get started here in just a few minutes, but we're going to just let people trickle on as they jump on. And in the meantime, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Melanie Hester, and it is an absolute honor and privilege to work here at Awana. I've been working here for about 18 months now, and I am in the communications team, and it's just a joy to be able to come and serve you guys. And man, has the last year and a half been a wild ride for us. If that is true for you, let's just hear an amen or something in those comments, because I just want to take a second and say, guys, you survived. Awana family, you've made it. You guys have done an amazing job, and I cannot believe the stories that we've heard from so many of your churches, the ways that you've continued on in discipleship, and honestly, times where you were like, I don't know how we're going to keep doing this, and yet you're still here. And in fact, you're not only here, but you're here today saying, hey, we're going to come back in the fall again, and it's going to be different again, and we're going to do this together. So I have with me today for this online event, I have three incredible people, and some of you might recognize them as your local Awana missionary. And so we have Bob Bennett. He and his wife, Dorinda, they serve out on the East Coast, out in Pennsylvania. And man, they have been with Awana for a very long time. And let me tell you, their impact and legacy has been absolutely incredible. In fact, they have a son and a daughter-in-law who are also Awana missionaries. And so it's really fun to have Bob on with us today. We've also got Andrea Perkins. Andrea has been an Awana missionary for about 4 years now, and she serves the very heart of Texas. And so if y'all are from Texas, give her a shout out, because she just tells us all the time about how much she loves each and every one of you and the churches that she serves in the great state of Texas. And then lastly, we have on with us today Tyler O'Donnell, and he and his wife Katie have been serving Kansas as Awana missionaries again, man, for a long time. And guys, we're just so blessed to have these leaders who choose to invest in each one of you, because we find this the thing that God has put in our hearts to do. We are called to this in a way that we've never been called to anything. And so, Tyler, thank you for being with us here today. And I just want to let everybody know to kind of get acclimated to this Zoom piece. If you haven't really ever been on a webinar, then you'll see along the bottom, there's an opportunity for you to chat. There's two options there. You can either chat just with the panelists if you have a specific question, or you can actually chat and send that to everybody. And so if you're figuring that out right now, would you take a minute to introduce yourself to everybody? We would love to see the chat having a conversation just as much as the four of us are going to be having a conversation on here today. The second piece that you can interact with us on is through the Q&A. And Bill Gunter, I saw that you already got one of those in there, and I'm so glad to see you on here today. So thank you for shooting that question off. If you have a question, you can actually click on that Q&A button, and that's something that will be sent directly to our team that's on the chat that are helping to manage those questions. If it's a question we see coming in repeatedly, that's going to be one that we'll try to take on at the end if we have any sort of time to answer for the whole, for all of you. But otherwise, we will have our team figuring out what it looks like to answer those questions. And if need be, we'll throw that question and answer into the chat as well. So I see these names coming in. Oh my goodness, guys, we've got people from both coasts. I saw Washington and New York. We saw North Carolina. I'm seeing Illinois. Hey, shout out Illinois. Those of us who still live here. So glad to see you. Nancy here. Hi, it's so good to see you. We've got Europe here too. Oh my word. Guys, I am just so thankful that you're here today. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get this conversation started. A couple of months ago, everybody, we began to just continue to have this conversation of like, what does it look like to help our community of leaders shift into club in the fall of 2021? Does it not feel like over to 2020, when the world changed and all of us had to figure out in our separate states what that looks like, right? And so then like 2020 changed, like really it was kind of a little bit in like the end of 2019, we started seeing things shift, and then we shut down in 2020. Some of us came back virtual in the fall of 2020. And then in the spring, right, of 2021, we're figuring out what does this look like? We're closing things up. Some of us were virtual the entire time. Some of us were able to wind up welcoming kids back in. And all of a sudden we find ourselves at another moment of pivot. And everybody's like, I hate that word, right? Can we stop having that be something that we're doing? And I'm telling you right now that this pivot, I think, is something that God is going to use in incredibly powerful ways, because this is one that we get to plan for. This is a pivot that we know is coming. It's a change that we know we have to make. And so we created this event, and we also have a resource we're going to be sharing with you at the end of this called a Coming Back to Club Guide. And it's supposed to be how to start this space of launching your children's ministry, your Awana Club, your children's ministry again this fall. And so one of the pieces that we knew we all had to start with was going back to the beginning and saying, okay, what is essential in my ministry? What do I need to do in this season? What does God ask of me in the fall of 2021? And so, Tyler, as you and Katie have been serving the churches that you do in Kansas, talk to me about what that's looked like. What have you guys found is essential in child discipleship?
Melanie, that is a great question, and I'm super excited to be on here today to share a little bit about why child discipleship is important. And I think it's first important to go back and remember what defines us. What defines us personally, what defines us in our ministry, and it's the gospel. At Awana, we're relentlessly committed to the gospel of Jesus Christ and to share the gospel with clarity and urgency. And then what unites us? Everybody here is united under a common purpose, a common vision. And it's that the children and youth around the world will come to know, love, and serve the Lord Jesus Christ. And for you, for me here in Kansas, it's my prayer that all the children in Kansas will have the opportunity to know, love, and serve Jesus Christ. For you in your local city that we just saw, from Chandler, Arizona to Springfield, Missouri, that's our common vision, to see the children in our communities come to know, love, and serve Jesus Christ. And that drives us into our mission. Our mission at Awana is to equip leaders. So you here today, our passion is to equip you to go and share the gospel and then engage kids in lifelong discipleship. So that guides us into our ministry philosophy for child discipleship and why it's important. It's important for us to raise a generation of disciples that is resilient. You may have heard that key word resilient a lot around our Awana circles. But what's essential in child discipleship is to raise children to be resilient disciples of Christ, like the world's never seen. I think of my own children. When they're my age, when they're in their 30s, it's going to be 2050 here in the US and around the world. And what will our world look like? And what I'm doing today is going to impact how they serve, how they love the Lord in their lives as an adult. So really building their firm foundation. Why is it important for child discipleship? Is because just like the wise man who built his house upon the rock, we want to be able to build our children's lives on the Lord Jesus Christ, so that when the world around them starts to throw their arrows, the storms of life come through and sweep through, that they will bend and flex but not break, that they'll stand resilient under the pressures of this world, so that they can have a solid and core foundation. So we do that through our ministry philosophy of 3 B's: belonging, believing, and becoming. On the slide here, this is our image that we like to share around what is effective child discipleship, and it contains these 3 things. The first we look at is belonging. We want our children to have a place where they feel safe, where they are secure, where they can experience the love of God through his people, that they can experience it in their own life, that they have a place where they belong. The second part of that we focus on is Awana is a place where children can believe. We're belonging is the highly relational part. The belief is the highly scriptural part of Awana. It's where children are building their lives in the Lord Jesus Christ. They're memorizing scripture. They're growing closer to him in their walk with him. And all that is for the purpose that they can become a lifelong follower of Jesus Christ, that they will serve him for their entire life. I always share this story because I love it so much, but D.L. Moody shared with a friend one day after he was preaching that 2.5 people got saved at his service. And his friend responded, "What do you mean 2.5 people got saved?" He said, the friend asked, "You mean 2 adults and 1 child?" And D.L. Moody quickly responded, "No, 2 children and 1 adult." The friend, still perplexed, said, "Well, you're going to have to clarify that for me. What do you mean, you know, 2 children and the adult's a half?" Um, and D.L. Moody just responded, "You see, this adult has already lived half their life, and they only have half their life to give to the Lord. These children have their whole life ahead of them to serve the Lord. They have their whole life ahead of them to bring the truth and the love and the gospel of Jesus Christ to others in the world around them." And you see, when you save a child, you save a whole life. So effective child discipleship is important to us because they're the ones who are going to be the fruit, the fearless future of the church. They're the ones that are going to be building and continuing to reach and disciple others for generations to come. So I think that's, to me, what it means to find effective child discipleship is to equip you to find fruitful ministry where we're planting these seeds of God's truth and God's word into the lives of these children, and we're seeing it blossom and grow fruit and bear fruit so that others can too come to know, love, and serve Jesus Christ.
Absolutely, Tyler. Thanks for walking us through that because I think it gives so many of us words, I think, for things that we always knew to be true, but didn't necessarily have the right way to say them. And so, Bob, could you kind of, I think you and Dorinda have been missionaries now for over 2 decades. Like, what, what has it looked like as you've seen this shift? What this belong, believe, become, to me, while we might have put words to it, it's always been something that's been at the core of our Awana clubs, right? And our children's ministry. So talk to us a little more about that.
Sure. Well, absolutely. And I was so excited to be a part of this today because this is just like a continuation of what we've been doing for a long, long time, and really what Art Rohrheim started many years ago. When you talk about we want kids to feel like they belong, um, you know, I love to hear somebody use the phrase, who is your tribe? Right? I mean, sometimes the kids are like having a tribe of there, but they need to feel like they are a part of something, like they want to be there, like this is the best place we could possibly be. And the same thing's true with Awana leaders and commanders and so on. Yeah, I'm showing my age. Commanders, Awana ministry directors, because if this is the best place you could be, if this is what God's called you to do, then you're going to help those kids feel like they belong here too. And then the belief and the becoming part of that will happen as a result of learning and studying our key verse. Study to show yourself approved unto God. As the kids study and the leaders study, we're all growing in our faith together. And so it's been an exciting journey for us from when our church, the first time we ever heard the word Awana, our Awana missionary was coming to do a presentation for my home church to get started. And Dorinda and I we didn't even have kids at that point, but we were like, you know what, we're planning on having a family, and we want to be involved in children's ministry, and we want God to be a part of our children's lives. And so let's get involved here. Let's be a part of this. And I think that's still true today.
Melanie, I'm gonna jump in and just kind of add to that. So I mean, I'm much newer to the field, But one of my favorite things about how our ministry philosophy with the 3 Bs kind of grows over time as kids are in this belong and believe and become circle is that it then kind of layers out that kids who are believing because they're belonging in ministries, as they develop that discipleship, they gain a better concept for how many other people in the world also need to be belonging, right? So it kind of drives this awareness of international need for the gospel that maybe your average kid doesn't necessarily have, right? It's hard to even conceptualize that there's a whole big world out there that has the same gospel need they do. So to be bringing, Awana back and having opportunities with Awana Go to do missions things, or being connected with your local missionary, and then finding ways to use Awana kids partnered with your church to do whatever missions your church is doing. It kind of just drives that 3B philosophy into your whole, into your whole ministry, not even just your Awana ministry. So I love that. I love the outward looking awareness that comes from belonging, recognizing if you belong, then other people don't yet. And how do we bring those in?
Andrea, that is so good. I love the part of that too, is you keep saying that it kind of serves as something that helps us to think outward. It also kind of serves as almost like a compass, or like trying to remember like where are we headed and what are we trying to do, right? And because I think often we can kind of get stuck in some of the same things that we're doing. One, because they seem successful, or it's just kind of what we've always done. And I think the 3Bs are the thing that we want to bring about, that say, hold on, is what I'm doing helping a child know that they belong here, that no matter what, this is a place where we want them to know the love of Jesus no matter what, and we'll make that happen. Valerie tells a beautiful story about how this club was having such a difficult time until they realized that the kids that were coming were hungry and they needed to be fed. And once they had something in their bellies, they then were able to connect and sit in a place where they could come to know Jesus in a powerful way. That might be really specific for each one of you as to what your community needs. But being able to go through the belong, the believe, and the become begins to help you stay centered of, is our club discipling these children in a way that helps them see Jesus no matter what? And so we're going to shift here into a space where, as you adapt those 3Bs, that then might bring about some questions and some things that you have to process through of, so how do these 3 things, belong, believe, and become, how do they impact what my club practically looks like? And so one of the things we're going to help you walk through when you dig into this guide is this idea of evaluation. And honestly, evaluation is something that can be really hard because it tends to bring out both the good and the bad, right? And I know for some of, I know for me, I don't know about for you, for some of you, you might be like, oh my word, no, that is not okay. I don't want to hear all the horrible things that I'm doing. But let me tell you, evaluation is so much more than that. Evaluating your ministry really gives you a pulse on what is actually happening in all the powerful ways that God is working in and through you, and then some of the ways that you might be able to tweak and adjust. And so, Andrea, why is ministry evaluation important, and how can that play into our clubs?
Well, I am a huge nerd. And so ministry evaluation is probably one of my very favorite parts of even serving in any organization. The thing that makes it important is that it's the starting point because of the way time passes. An evaluation today is the starting point for whatever's next, right? It's just like setting any goal or having any idea of what you want to do in the future. It starts with a first step. And if you don't know where that first step starts, it's really hard to know how to take steps to get where you want to be. So this guide especially includes several topics for evaluating what has happened in your ministry, as well as what you want to be happening in your ministry. And then how do we bridge that gap, right? I mean, with the passage of time, everyone has a future desired outcome for their ministry. Every church has a future desired outcome for the community that they're reaching, for the congregation that they're leading. And so we just articulated in this guide some of the questions that you might want to take a look at. If you're a huge nerd like me, nerds unite, you're going to enjoy this. Grab you some blank paper and, do a really thick and thorough job on this. But God knitted us all together differently. And so if this is going to be a bigger struggle for you, or if you're not familiar as much with this kind of evaluation, the guide is a really good, soft place to start. And I'm going to tell you how to make the most of it, as well as how to get other people to help you if it's not something that's naturally your jam. But I promise by the end, you're going to love evaluation more than you did when you started with the guide, because it's just healthy. It's just healthy. All right, so I guess for me, the 3 ways to really dig into ministry evaluation so that it's useful is both to be in the right headspace and in the right heart space, so that you can make a useful workspace for designing the ministry that you love and that meets all of your goals. In that headspace, it's really important, especially if you don't love evaluation or if you're newer to it, that you don't view this at all as like a pass fail situation. This is not the point of evaluation. It's not even an indictment of things that maybe didn't go as well as you would have hoped last year, or of your leadership. If you're a new AMD and you can think of 40 things that you would have changed about last year, it's not a condemnation. It's not a place to feel embarrassed about bringing out, some dirty ministry laundry. Like, we didn't actually connect with parents that well. It's a place to take a look at what God has already allowed you to do, to celebrate those wins, but then to take a look at what He may be calling you to do, or to do a little better next. Okay. Remember, your ministry isn't yours, right? So spending too much time like evaluating exactly how you did it, it's not about you, right? So we're evaluating how open and how obedient we were to what God was asking us to do, and then just being a little more like that each year. So as far as your headspace, just view anything that wasn't 100% what you would have preferred as an opportunity to innovate, to get closer to your goal next year. That's a really important headspace to be in, because all of us, me included, here in the Awana Heart of Texas office, can think of 40 ways I would like to do my ministry better this year than I did last year, right? That's true for every single program. No one, I think, is sitting in their children's wing thinking, well, that went perfectly. Every single child here was maximally impacted for the gospel because of what we were doing. We know that God is always bringing us beautiful, unholy messes to bring closer to His Son. So that's the headspace, right? It's a place of growth. The second is heart space. When you're actually going to work on the evaluation, especially if you start with the guide, find a quiet space, get your coffee or your tea, give yourself the minutes to really think through what it is you did and what you would like to be doing. Setting that aside is so valuable. I know that that can be hard. Family things and work things and life things and summer is just a congested time in everybody's schedule. But there's a real beauty in taking that time to listen to what God is actually saying to you about what you got done, right? Because He powered your ministry, whether you admit that or not. He did, right? You are capable only of doing what He asked because He has powered you. So take time to listen to that feedback. Let him tell you, well done, good and faithful servant. Here's what's next. Because He will if you ask. He is faithful that way. So bring your humility in kind of a 360-degree review. Please don't evaluate your ministry alone and then act like your thoughts about your ministry are the gospel, because there are perspectives, I guarantee you, from the people who served with you, who saw great things that you didn't see while you were working on your set of duties, right? Who have stories to tell about how God moved, who have things that not only they thought this could be fixed, but have already thought of a solution for. Okay, so make use of that connection and feedback to the people that you served with, because even if you can't necessarily come up with a 100% solution to what they identify, you will be closer as co-laborers in this work because you have sought out that feedback and taken that seriously from them. And that's just good for ministry health, no matter what. basically you're just committing to an upward spiral of ministry effectiveness. Okay. It's not extreme makeover. You're not doing the facelift and the brow lift and the tummy tuck and all the lipo all at once in 7 days, right? Do you guys remember that show from the early 2000s? It was terrifying. At the end of that week, those people were unrecognizable. Your ministry and your church need to be recognizable, growing toward Jesus. Okay. So put out of your mind fixing all of the things you identify at once, and pick the things that you can actually try to do something new on. Might work, might not, but in general, you're just going to get a little better every week.
Yeah, to add on to that, in creating this back to club guide, I just put the link again in the chat box so that the people who are thinking, what's she referring to? That's the one thing we want you to walk away with today on what are the next steps. This discussion we're having is important. But what does that leave me with after today's webinar? Inside of this back to club guide, like Andrea was talking about, there are some great tools to evaluate yourself, to evaluate what church leadership and their involvement in your children's ministry and Awana ministry, moving into your volunteers and families' involvement, and then just generally what to think about. And if there are things, I know we're going to continue talking about this today, but as an Awana missionary, I get to go out to so many churches and they're asking questions on, we thought about doing this, but does that work in terms of what Awana allows and what Awana doesn't allow? And I always just tell them yes. We want you to find effective child discipleship. So that tags on to my first question that you asked, Melanie. What works for your church and what works for your Awana ministry? Your kids best. Your children best, and your leaders as well. What motivates them to keep coming back? And oftentimes it's referring them back to the reason of why we do what we do, and to evaluate, are we elevating our vision? Are we elevating our mission? Are we evaluating and elevating ourselves and our leadership? Are we, leaders are constant learners. So this tool, this back to club guide is just one of the tools that you can put in your toolbox and then share with your leaders. Take it and hand it out and say, hey, as we're evaluating how to relaunch Awana this fall, what are some things that we might do differently and roll into effective child discipleship, effectively reaching children with the gospel, effectively reaching kids in our community and bringing them in. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And then training them. This evaluation will lead from evaluation into next steps, into, now that I've gone through this list of evaluations and the importance of it, like Andrea just talked about, now how can I go about implementing some of those things? And I know Bob's going to speak into that as well here in a second, but this guide is just going to be an important piece in your planning for this coming fall.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in here too when we're talking about the evaluation part of this. Having been in ministry for quite some time now, working with churches, I have churches that have had Awana for 50 or 60 years. They've been running Awana Club, and some of them, they don't want to. It's as if they don't want to evaluate because they're scared that they're going to find something we've been doing wrong all these years. And the thing is that if we don't evaluate, we don't know how to get better, right? We just keep doing the same thing we've done year after year. And so some of our churches are in that rut where they're like, oh yeah, we're going to do this again next year. And we're just going to do the same thing. And while, consistency is great, and I love the commitment that says, yeah, we're going to just keep doing this, forever. But the point is, we need to be effective also in our ministry. And so when we take time to evaluate, like Andrea said, if we can get ourselves in the right headspace and the right heart space so that we can look at this and I've seen people do evaluation. They come up with this great big long list of things they want to change. But like Andrea said, just pick a few of them and start working on that so that you can get better, So you can start that upward spiral, so that we're getting better and better every year, so that you can look back over 60 years of ministry and say, man, we have seen, thousands of kids come through here and their lives have been changed. And some of them are running our church now, and so that's an important thing. And we do run into pastors and elders and so on all the time that say, hey, I came up through Awana when I was a kid, and it really prepared me for what God wanted me, the ministry God wanted me to get into. And so we are having an impact in children's lives, and we are making a difference in the world because of the ministry we've done over the years. And we want to make sure that that continues way into the future.
Man, that is so good. Thanks to each of you for pulling us into that space. We've had a couple of questions come up, and I know that Betsy mentioned it a couple of comments ago of like, okay, hold on, but I'm pulling leaders in from like early to like 2019 that they've been gone for a year. So how am I supposed to evaluate when we can barely remember what happened 3 weeks ago, right? Like, what does it look like for teams to come together and kind of participate in this evaluation piece, but not necessarily have a whole lot to reflect on? What would that look like?
I think that's a great point. It's really hard to evaluate from 2 years ago before, right? The before. So you can evaluate kind of from a place of hopefulness, as far as what your after should be, right? So you can do what I call a blank slate evaluation. You start with a blank piece of paper using the questions in this guide. You don't have to necessarily look back to how it was. You can turn them into future questions and say, if I could design an ideal ministry, how would it look? Because even just starting from nothing, getting into a future that's more aligned with your church's goals is still going to be a useful evaluation for you. The other note, I would just remind us all that low hanging fruit is still fruit, right? And so if you can think of really small changes, printing all of your color pages for the Sparks in August instead of making that a task that happens weekly, just do it once, right? So that they're always there. Little things like that that can take stress away from your leaders, can make a huge difference, even if you don't, as a director, necessarily notice that, ooh, I'm out of color pages is a friction point that one of your leaders has been finding. So the things that are worst, right? The things that you most need to really tackle, your leaders will remember. So I would encourage you just to ask them, even if you think they may not remember their biggest friction point or honestly fracture. You never know, right? We're still people. So there could have been, difficulties with staffing. Your people remember those because we all do. So, but yeah, look forward if you can't look back.
I think one of the things I love to do with churches when I have a chance to come in and meet with their leaders is to just take a whiteboard and say, if I come back a year from now and you're telling me about the best year you've ever had in Awana, what would that look like? And they start throwing out ideas like, oh man, we'd love to have 100 kids. We'd love to have kids being saved. We'd love to impact families. We'd love to have parents engaged. And so we just start writing down this list. And then once you create that list, then you can look at that list and go, okay, so what steps do we take today that lead us toward that eventual accomplishment? And so you like to have kids trust Christ as Savior. Great. You say, man, that would make this the best year ever if we had a record number of kids trust Christ. Great. So how many times are we going to present the gospel this year? And how are we going to do that in a meaningful way that makes sense to the kids we're working with? Once you start fleshing those things out, then it's like, oh, now we can create sort of a step-by-step. This is what we need to do in order to get where we want to be a year from now. And so that's what I would do is you don't have a lot to look at last year and say, man, this was good or bad. But you can look at it and say, if we want to have the best year we've ever had in Awana, or maybe you look at your church mission and vision statement and say, boy, if we want to accomplish this in our Awana club, what could we do? And so that's where I would start if I had a group of leaders and I'm trying to figure out how do I even begin to evaluate.
Bob, I love that. Sorry, I'm going to jump back in. I love that like dreaming big approach to what your ministry can be For everyone who is feeling a little bit of tension in their chest now, if I let them dream big, will they expect me to do all the things we dream up? Remember that no AMD is an island. So just because you've identified things to develop or things to improve or ways that you want to innovate, doesn't mean you're responsible for defining that solution. People can dream big on coming up with the fixes as well. And you're also not solely responsible for implementing any of those innovations or changes, right? Like, you build a team, to help you do those things so that you can afford to dream big in the evaluation phase, because you're not going to give yourself an aneurysm trying to do all those things by yourself. Get you a team, fire up with the Holy Spirit, and then march forward with your ideas.
Yeah, and just to add on lastly to that same discussion, is that your leaders, your passion for children's ministry is contagious. As you're evaluating this and looking at, hey, we took a year off, how can we get back going? Start that fire in your life. Your Awana ministry, as I've learned in leadership. I heard a speaker once say, your ministry, your church, your Awana club will only be as effective as your top leader wants it to be. So if you're a ministry director, if you're a pastor, if you're a Sparks TNT director, or just a leader, lead up in the fact that you want to ignite that passion and vision as far as you can to your leaders, to your children, to your families, because it starts with you. God chose each of us. God could have put you on this earth at any point in time of history, and he chose you for this moment. He chose you for where you are to serve, to reach kids with the gospel here in the U.S., in your city, in your community, for a purpose. And our purpose is to go and share the gospel and the good news of Jesus Christ. So just continuing to go back to the why, continuing to go and lead up and lead forward for the sake of the gospel. And yeah, just continuing to push that message forward.
Yeah, Bob, Andrea, Tyler, y'all are all kind of running through the same concept thought, right? Of like, let's take that phrase, Andrea, that you mentioned of no AMD is an island, right? That goes a couple of ways. That goes both down to the teams that you lead, right? What better way to get engagement and involvement from those teams than to literally involve them? To ask them to be a part of the planning process with you, instead of just being like, all I need you to do is show up. Now, some of those leaders might not be able to do more than that, and that's okay. But we call a guiding coalition is a group of people that can come alongside you, and they're going to help walk this process through with you. And it may not be your entire volunteer team. It's just going to be maybe 4 or 5 people who are like, I'm in, let's dream, let's set and plan this. But then AMD, that also connects to the leadership above you. That you can't be an island that just happens to run Awana midweek, and they're just really glad because it brings in families and it's all good and we really love it. And then it just kind of stays disconnected from the church and the vision that the leadership has for that. And so we're going to shift into this third part because family, as you are establishing this philosophy, right, then that's going to move into those evaluation questions. And these are just the big 3 core things that you're going to want to do first before you then dig into the more detailed practical ways to change. But as you adapt that philosophy, and then you see in the evaluation, the ways that God just brings out so clearly the ways that you can adapt and change for this new year. The third piece that then has to stay connected is what it looks like for you to then communicate that to your church leadership and continue to make sure that you are unified in that vision. So Bob, will you talk to us about how do we facilitate the change as we move into this new year?
Sure. I was thinking through this the other day, and I came up with kind of two tracks, right? One is on how do you facilitate change, period. Like, if we know that there's changes that need to be made, how do we go about making those changes? And then the second part of that is, how do we have that meaningful or important conversation and communicate that with church leaders, pastor, elders, CE committee, whoever, whatever your setup is that you are working under. Most of us have, authorities over us, people that we are, accountable to. And so I want to kind of address both of those. So let me kind of address the first one. How do we facilitate change at all? And so the first thing I want to put on the list is pray. We need to be in prayer, and we need to be praying about this. Change is difficult for anybody on every level, right? So whether it's a very small little change that you want to make, or whether it's a major change, like you're going to move your club to a different night, or something like that, any of those changes are they're difficult for people. Some people struggle more with it than others. We need to be praying about this, first of all, to make sure God is leading us to do this. It's not just something that's more convenient for me and I'm going to impose my will on this or whatever, but this is something God has led us to, and it will help us to reach more kids. It will help us to be more effective as a club. And then when you're working through that process, you need to think about who's going to be affected by this, right? If it's a change that's going to affect your Sparks group, then you need to communicate well with them. But maybe you may not need to communicate with everyone about this one little policy change that you're making in Sparks. But if it's something that's going to affect all the parents and everybody, then you're going to have to communicate that in a little different way. When I talk about communicating, there's a term that I love. Somebody taught me a long time ago, and it says casting vision, right? It's like casting a net. If you're going to catch fish, if you've ever seen somebody cast a net, they kind of throw it out over the water. And when we have an idea, something needs to be changed. We've noticed that, and we need to cast that vision to others. We need to cast it up to the people that are in authority over us, but we also need to cast it out to the people we work with, the parents, and to the kids even. We need to cast vision to the kids. Hey, this is why we're doing this, because this is going to be better for us in our club. And so make sure you cast vision. And if that can be centered around your church's vision and mission statement, that alignment is so important. So when you see that happening, you think, oh man, we need to make some changes. If you can look at that and say, boy, here's our church's vision statement. Here's our Awana vision statement for our club. This is how we're going to bring them together. And that's why this change needs to happen. It kind of makes it a no-brainer. Everybody looks at that and goes, oh yeah, that change needs to happen, right? But if you are going in maybe a different direction than your church's vision statement, then you're looking at that going, oh, wait a minute, maybe we better align those. Let's pray about this some more and see how those things align. And then, I also like to talk to the people who are going to be impacted before any public announcement of this change is made, right? Nobody likes to be surprised by something that's going to be changed. So if you think about who is going to be impacted by this, and then make sure you go personally, or you have a small meeting where you can discuss this and you can lay this out to the people that are going to be impacted before all of a sudden they see an announcement in your church bulletin, or they see it up on your website or something, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, I'm the last one to know about this. Those kinds of things will help your change to go through more smoothly. And then I also love the idea of creating a frequently asked questions kind of thing, because then people will, you can present this idea, like if you feed this out to all of your directors from your clubs, then they can use the talking points in that to make sure we're all on the same page. We're all saying this the same way. Because if a parent comes to them and says, hey, why are we changing the time of our club? And they say, gee, I have no idea why so-and-so made that decision. That sounds like it really wasn't planned well. It wasn't thought through. But if they come back and say, here's why we're changing this, because this is going to allow us to reach more kids and so on, then you are coming at it from a positive place, and it really kind of cuts down the negativity. Now, let me kind of shift gears a little bit and go to the conversation part of this, right? If you need to talk to your pastor or elders or CE director about a change that's going to take place, please don't go to them on Sunday morning, like when he just got finished preaching a message, and say, "Oh, by the way, Pastor, I need to change the time of our Awana club." Right? That's not the time to bring those kind of things to him. Make sure you allow the right time. Set an appointment. Make an appointment for a meeting. Make sure you allow time for leaders, especially, to process what you're trying to tell them. If your pastor's not there on club night every week, he might not realize why you need to make that change. And so you're going to bring the idea for the change, but you also need to say, here's why we need to do this. And then he's going to need time to process that and really ask questions back. Don't get offended. Don't get offended or upset when your pastor pushes back a little bit and says, well, why would you want to do that? Why do you want to make that change? He's just trying to process. He's trying to figure out, is this going to be a good move? And what can we do? And then sit down with them and plan a strategy for implementing this change that you need to make. Don't just announce it, come up with the idea yourself and say, man, we're going to do this. Make sure you incorporate your church leaders, have those meetings, and plan a strategy for how do we announce this? How do we make sure everybody knows that this change is taking place? And then, do we need to change policy in some churches have a policy manual, or they have things written down that this is how we're going to do this. And if they may need to communicate that to other people. So make sure you incorporate all of those things. Again, change is never easy, but I think if we apply some sort of common ground, if we find a way to bring everybody back to common ground and say, this is going to allow us to reach more kids, or this is going to allow us to engage parents, or this is going to allow us to align with our church's mission statement. If we can bring it back to those kind of things, then the changes that we are proposing don't seem like a mountain we have to cross. It's just a bump in the road, And so I think it's important for us to make sure that we deal with this wisely and in a way that shows respect to others around us. And we didn't just make a decision because this is what I want to do, but this is something that's going to be good for the ministry and allow us to do God's work in a great way, so that God will work through us and we'll see more boys and girls and moms and dads come to know Christ as Savior.
Yeah, change is difficult. It's a difficult subject, and implementing it is, like Bob said, you got to walk a line that you're making sure you're doing it for the right reasons, which is hopefully for the sake of the kids and not for the sake of convenience for us as leaders, even though that's nice at times. I always go back to this quote by Craig Rochelle, that we will do anything short of sin to share the gospel with others, to bring the good news, whatever it takes. If that means, I have this at several churches, their Awana night is the same night as their choir practice. And there's a big conflict between that, but they worked together to find a solution to where, their small group times, those choir leaders are able to come down and meet with the kids. And then for that second half, they go up and do choir while the kids are playing games and doing other things that second half. And just finding that common ground, like Bob said, to implement changes to reach and disciple more kids. There's always a solution, whether or not it might not be our favorite choice per se. But yeah, just going into it first with prayer. If you're looking for advice on how to implement change, I encourage you to read the book of Nehemiah and the prayerful request that he went into the king and made that request to go and build a wall. And just having that same mindset, that prayerful, like Bob mentioned, going into things with humility and grace is important when you're starting to make changes.
So I think for me, like I'm pretty transparent about the fact that I lead my ministry basically from a foundation of my flaws and the way that God shapes them, uses them, empowers them into something useful for ministry. But if you know on the inside of you that you're a little bit of an empire builder by nature, that maybe you have been around in a ministry that's been a long time, and you're like, it's not going to fail on my watch, that those are good sentiments to have, but that when we are doing the communication with people, especially outside of our club, just as Tyler mentioned, taking that position of humility, because your ministry may have seasons where you don't get everything that you want, that you don't get the fellowship hall, even though you absolutely need it for game time because something else is scheduled, on that night. Um, those things are for a reason too, right? So none of those kind of pinch points are a surprise to God. And none of them are also something that's going to hamper his ability to bring his gospel to people he is calling, right? So as much as I don't know about you guys, but for me, when I'm like, but can't you see my ministry is growing and I want to grow more, you should give me everything we have, that it's easy for that to kind of slide into kind of a prideful place. I don't know, for me, maybe not for you, where we are really focusing on growth for the kids. That also makes us feel pretty good, like we have controlled something and built something. And so sometimes you may get to go through a little bit of rougher season in some of those aspects, communicating with your church, because it's time for you to get refocused on being a humble servant in a ministry that God has called you to. And then the other thing I always forget frequently when I'm talking to pastors, even now as a missionary, I forget that like the mechanics of a local Awana club are not the main entree on a senior pastor's plate. Right. The mission and the vision and the desire to spread the gospel, absolutely, right? That's the steak on the plate, because this is Texas, so obviously the entree is steak. um, but we want our children's ministry to be the snake, to be the steak, and that's usually not always the case. So I'm a big fan of preparing almost like whole proposals for changes. One page with plenty of white space. What is this? Is it going to cost anything? How's this going to impact? And have that literally laid out so he can take that with him when he's, sitting at visitation with somebody who's in the hospital. Give him plenty of time in a really clear way to help those decisions make sense to him, so that hopefully you can get to yes for what you want, if that's how the Lord leads. So that due diligence on the front end keeps you from having to be annoyed because you didn't necessarily get your yes, or you didn't get it as quickly or as completely as you might hope when you're making policy changes for your club.
One thing I forgot to mention, it was on my list, and I went back and read my notes after I got done. I've met a lot of people over the years who are very passionate about the ministry they're working with, and especially if they come up with an idea for a change that they think is going to help them reach more kids, and they can get really passionate about it. And that's great. And when you go to meet with church leaders, pastor or elders or a CE committee or whoever, it's great to show your passion, but not to make it an emotionally charged meeting, because you can sometimes we get so passionate about stuff that we can bring our emotions into that, and then you get in the middle of this meeting and everything is so emotional, especially if you're the one making the presentation. If you are emotional about it, people will sit there and go, man, I don't really want to push back. I don't want to ask any questions because I'm afraid that I'm going to hurt this person. Like I don't want to hurt them emotionally. So show your passion. I think that's great. We need to be passionate about children's ministry. And yeah, that's a great point, Andrea, about our ministry not necessarily being the biggest thing on pastor's plate, but we need to show that passion. But let's try to make sure it's not, we don't make this an emotionally charged kind of meeting that we're going to have with them. Give them time to think through and react and ask questions, and they may want to do their own research or something and then come back to you. And that brings me to the other thing I was going to mention is always be ready for a follow-up. Like you might have a meeting with your pastor to present an idea, but be ready to say, hey, could I follow up with an email about this? Or could we have another meeting in a couple of weeks to finish this off? And that way, you can kind of give them time to work through their whatever questions they have.
Man, you guys, that has been so helpful in really tying everything together and trying to give us a place to start. And I just noticed that, Fran, you mentioned in the chat that you meet quarterly with your pastors and elders, and that you have like a phone touch basis with the pastor every other week. And I just want to say that's incredible. Right? Because I think what that shows is that your pastor is so deeply engaged that he is wanting to connect and understand and learn and know. And it's Awana, and the discipleship that comes out of that is a part of the fabric of your church and the vision there. And so I think, but to that point, everybody, if y'all are just coming with a problem to your church leadership or to your pastor, and you're only ever wanting to meet with them when you're having to change things, I just want to encourage you to not do that. You start talking with them now. And I think I saw a bit ago in the chat, Krista, you mentioned like, we're hoping to make this transition, and I'm really hoping that we're going to be able to even have Awana approved. And I think that one of the things that you can start doing is pitch to the pastor, hey, I'd like to meet with you twice a year at a minimum. The first is to kind of cast vision for where we're headed. The second is going to be at the end to show you all that God did. And maybe there's a mid check-in point there to let you know where we're at and how we're going to pivot mid-year. But if you guys can connect specifically outside of changes, then all of a sudden you've already created a framework to be able to have those conversations when changes need to happen. And you'll be able to have those conversations, like Bob said, where you're not emotional and it's just a part of what you've normally been doing. And again, that might start with what Tyler had mentioned, with you leading up. The pastor may not ask to meet with you, and that's just the way that it is. It's okay. We know as children's ministry leaders that the discipleship of these children is what makes our heart beat. And like Tyler said, we'll do everything, aside from sinning, to keep these children in learning in the church, knowing about what Jesus has done for them. And so you are the advocate for those kids. So advocate for them. Go reach out and say, hey, pastor, I'd like to meet with you. What would that look like? Could we have time? So there's been so many great comments and questions, and if you continue to have some, then you can keep throwing those in the chat or sending them our direction. But there's a couple of things that we want to just wrap up our time together today, letting you know that there are some incredible resources that are available to you. And many of you have already seen that we've shared the Back to Club guide. That is for you. Please take that link, share that with all of your leaders, print that as many times as you need to, use it both digitally and in person. I took a minute and printed it today, and it was super easy. It came out really well. And it's something that I could imagine you could have in your home, and potentially also at, if you have an office space at the church. But this is going to be a great resource because it's going to take you through all of the things that we talked about. And one of the things that you'll really want to sit and spend some time with is in this evaluation section. All right. We talked about that. There's going to be questions. There's also space on each of these pages to jot down some notes. But if you're anything like Andrea and I, you're going to need maybe a couple of more lines. So feel free to pull up a document or something and make sure that you're able to really just write down all of the reflections that you have over that space. The other piece that I just want to make sure that you guys are aware of, remember that this is just the start of the conversation. All right. As you begin to unpack these questions and answer them and meet with your team and connect with your church leadership, you're then going to start digging into the details. And that's the point. I have served as both anything from just a listener to a director to an AMD. And I remember coming into an AMD season, and I remember it was August 1st, and I was like, I cannot believe that we're starting club in 30 days and I have nothing prepared. And that's part of why we're starting this conversation today, everybody, is for that that purpose. Let's begin to do these visionary things now so that when we hit that, then we can dig into those details and things start to come into play. So Tyler, there's a couple of more things, resources that we've seen in the chat, but we just want to officially make them known to you. What are those things?
Sure. We talked a lot about connecting and getting just equipped for this coming year. And we're coming up on our equipping season, which is pretty much our summer and fall season out in the missionary field for Awana. And if you didn't know, there are about 78 Awana missionaries in the U.S. alone here and ready and able to serve you, connect with you, come in and talk with you or your pastor just about how we can help and equip your team to do child discipleship. If you don't know who your Awana missionary is, we just dropped that in the chat box. There's a link there where you can put in your location and you can find them and connect with them. We would absolutely love to connect with you. That's our favorite part of the job is doing the groundwork, getting out there and connecting with people and building relationships with you so that we can see more children come to know, love, and serve Christ. So if you don't know who your Awana missionary is, be sure to follow that link. The other part is that in our equipping season, we have 2 events coming up that are either going to be local or online from our missionaries. The first is our Awana Connect. Awana Connect are these gatherings of leaders and directors to share about the importance of what we do, but also to build relationships around the commonalities we hold. We share about, hey, what's it look like to recruit leaders post COVID, and just start rubbing shoulders with finding out what are you guys working on, what's in the community that we can maybe even partner in and doing. So the Connect meetings are more informational type of meetings, but also for the purpose of connecting. That's why it's called Awana Connect. The second part to that is our largest equipping events of the season are our Awana ministry conferences. Those are going to be on the same site that you click to join and register for these events here today, the events.awana.org. And you'll see a long list of, there's, I think, about a dozen local Awana missionary or Awana ministry conferences. And then there's 3 virtual Awana ministry conferences this year, landing in August, September, and October. So those will be readily available for you to register. We'd love to see you and your entire team out for those ministry conferences. And then lastly, we have a brand new, you may have seen it in the comments, but we have a brand new, it's called Awana Basics Online, which is a training for leaders who are brand new to, if you need a refreshing, if you're a leader who's been serving, like Bob said, for 40 or 50 years, if you have internet access, which many of us do just right here on these little things, it's a mobile friendly, internet friendly training. And it's about a 2-hour course for each role or whatever you're going to be serving in. So there's club specific, but there's also AMD specific. So if you're a ministry director, we're going to have a ministry director track for you to follow on that. And it's going to hopefully be launched here in the next month. The beta is being tested right now. The videos are currently completed and being uploaded. So look out for information on that coming from Awana and from your Awana missionary about Awana Basics Online. So those are the 3 events to follow. Connect, Awana Ministry Conference, and Awana Basics Online.
Awana Basics Online is going to be so spectacular because what this does, everybody, is that it gives you specific videos unpacking each of the different roles, the ministry philosophy, the philosophy behind it. It walks you through page by page through each of the different books and for the main book for each of the different clubs. And it's just a powerful resource that you're now going to be able to do on your own time. And so I'm following up on this because we have been so jazzed to share this with each of you, because we truly believe that this is going to help change not only your leadership, but also the leadership of your directors and the leaders that are in each one of your clubs. Another follow-up piece, that resource that I want to share that is available for you is that we are about to release our digital product guide. And so this is for the 2021-2022 club year. And this is going to have everything that's normally in there. There's a couple of ways you're going to see this. It's going to feel very similar to the guide that you just checked out. It's going to come with a link that you can browse through, and it's beautiful. You're able to just digitally look at everything that you need, but then you can also print it out, and it is available to be printed like a booklet, so that if you want it to feel like that catalog that came into your mailbox every year, then that is what you're able to do. The best part about this is that because it's digital, you're going to now be able to share this with your leaders. You can share this with your directors. And I remember as the AMD in Colorado Springs, I remember taking the one catalog that I would get in the mail every year, and I would thumb through, and I would like kind of put like tabbies on the pages that I was thinking of what we would need, and then my directors would do the same. And the beautiful thing for the person that I like for things to be organized, that you now can send this to all of your people, and they can, in a beautiful way, just share their feedback with you of what might be best for their club, and you can start to make those decisions for what your club needs this fall as you prepare to launch again. So to just real quick, there's a last couple of things. As we begin to talk about that ministry philosophy piece of the 3Bs, if you haven't gotten your hands on a resilient book, you need to add this to your library, because actually it's not going to sit in your library for a while. It'll probably sit on your desk and bedstand for a bit, because you're going to want to piece through this and read portions of it over and over again. We unpack the 3B philosophy and resilience, and it really is, we call it our love letter to the church. And what it is that these are the stories of what y'all are doing and the beautiful things that God has done. And it's also gives context for how do we help children belong? How do we prioritize their belief in the Lord? And then how do we help them become resilient disciples in a culture that feels like it's just plowing them down? And so if you don't have this yet, that is something you can check out. It's in the Awana product guide as well, and you can buy that. And if this seems to be a conversation you want to continue on in, we're also hosting the Child Discipleship Forum in September. That is an event that's going to be both online and in person. If you happen to live in the vicinity of Nashville and want to come hang out with us for the day, it is going to be a time where we are bringing in leading voices on topics that help us understand how to make resilient disciples in today's culture. And so there's going to be voices like that might be familiar to you, like Ed Stetzer, but there's also going to be people like Christopher Yuan who are going to be talking to us about human sexuality and what that looks like, and how we hang on to the truth of God's word in today's culture. And so if that's something that you're interested, we want to see you there. I will be there. I know so many of us that are on this call today will also either be there in person or online, and we want to see you. And so check out the link that's been shared in the chat. We really, truly hope that this is something that that can help you come and listen and understand, and then take tools back to say, okay, this is how we continue to disciple in an age that wants to take my kids out, but God, you are bigger, you are stronger, and you will help these kids be resilient in the face of the culture we live in today. So with all of that, I just want to thank you for joining us today. We're going to sign off here. We hope that this has been incredibly helpful for you. Like we've said 100 times, guys, connect with your local Awana missionary. We want you so badly to have a relationship with them, because they're a huge help to you. If you have any sort of question, please share that with us. Share that both with, you can share it with partnercare@awana.org, or you can connect with your Awana missionary. But otherwise, we have an absolute honor serving you. We're so thankful for everything that you do in your churches, and we are here to help. So let us know what that might look like. So until next time, we'll see you guys later.